Center Cannot Hold by Elyn R. Sachs. I bought this book a few years back after meeting someone who had schizophrenia. She came off as very shy, standoffish, didn't say much, wouldn't really look you in the eye, and was very awkward in talking to people. But beyond that, she was very nice, but it got me wondering about that mental illness, so like I always do, I tried to find books on it. And there are a few. I got this one, but there's also another one called January 1st, which I thought about getting. I did not get that one. I ended up settling on this one. And the first thing I will say about it is buyer beware. The book itself is very good. I should say it's very informative. It's a very real look at what it's like to have schizophrenia. The book obviously starts off at the beginning of her life when she's starting to have these symptoms and starting to come down at a very young age with signs of mental illness. Basically what it boils down to is her mind would run away from her and she'd have these, we'll call them episodes, where she would just talk about being saddled with tremendous guilt from having killed a lot of people, or that people are trying to kill her constantly. But it wasn't for a few years later that her parents actually had her diagnosed. Now this obviously happened quite some time ago, so I'm hoping that treatments have changed since then. But treatments back then, I think it was the 60s and the 70s, stunk. I believe they said use straps liberally, restraints, and the medications, the antipsychotics that they were on would do horrible, horrible things to you. The side effects from the medications were awful. They'd make you twitchy, especially among other things. So it's no wonder why you'd want to get off those medications as soon as possible. So the whole book was kind of almost an endless cycle of her battling the illness, going back to treatment, taking the medication, feeling a little bit better, but wanting to get off the medications to avoid the side effects, reducing her medication, and having episodes all over again. And it's an endless cycle with no real sign of letting up. Now, she went on to do great things. She's an expert in mental health, a professor. But one thing I kept thinking of while listening to it, she had kind of, well, I'll say her parents had some resources. At least enough resources to get her diagnosed, treated. Even though it wasn't great treatment, she did have someone kind of looking out for her. And as a result, she had her support staff that helped her to finish college and live kind of a normal life. Now in the book, she makes it clear that she's a paranoid schizophrenic, basically delusional, thinking that people are out to get her or that she had already committed some tremendous, horrible act. So she was saddled with guilt. But I started to think about other people that I'd heard about and read about. For example, the movie A Beautiful Mind, he actually saw people, interacted with them. And so it got me digging into a little bit more on the different types that are out there. And it's a wide spectrum of types of schizophrenia that are out there. And I ended up also coming across a book called The Other Brain, which kind of goes into how this happens, how a brain is able to completely mislead you and exactly why that happens. Yes, it's true, I am actually that big of a nerd that I did also get the book, The Other Brain. Very interesting, but this one is also kind of up there too with that book, The Elegant Universe, because that one is also very hard to understand. It might lose you a little bit. What I do is I take those books and I listen to them to and from work, so you only have like an hour that you actually have to pay attention before you start to lose your mind. And then during the day, I'll listen to a fun book, and then it kind of resets your brain to listen to it again on the way home. But that book, The Other Brain, also goes into things like heroin. Why is heroin so addictive? What does it actually do to your brain chemistry, and why is it so hard to kick? Just kind of a side note, a side book, kind of goes along well with The Center Cannot Hold. Like I said before, I don't know that I would classify it as a good book. It's very frustrating, very hard to get through, but very informative, especially if you've ever met anyone with mental illness, or if you've rode the train in New York City and you see these crazy people wandering around the city. And like I said before, her parents had resources. They had a little bit of means, which is a little bit sad because it took a lot of resources for her to get from where she was to success later on in her life. So my question is how many of those drug addicts or whoever you see wandering around the subways of New York City, and I'm not talking about the ones that are panhandlers, I'm talking about the ones you actually see there's really something wrong with them, whether it's drugs or alcohol. How many of those people are trying to mask mental illness and have just fallen through the cracks of society? Really is very sad. A tough book to get through, but very informative. I think now I am going to get that book January 1st. I think her schizophrenia is way different, though, from what I've read in the synopsis. Let me know what you guys think if you've read it in the comments below, and I'll talk to you next time.